Do it. Hello and welcome to this special event, Tracing the Footsteps of Onshore Oil, a presentation by Jessica Bixby and DaniRose Hill, who are launching their brand new research zine that explores answers to a whole host of important questions, like where does the oil in Santa Barbara County come from? What communities does it pass through? And how does it connect us all? My name's David Pellow, and I am chair of the Environmental Studies program at UCSB. And I'm proud to be the MC and host for this event. Our sponsors are the Environmental Studies program and the Global Environmental Justice Project. Also, just a note, please be aware that we are recording this event. Before I continue, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Chumash people, their elders, both past and present, as well as their future generations. We acknowledge that this university, UC Santa Barbara, was built upon the villages and unceded lands of the Chumash people. We acknowledge that these lands that we seek to protect, impact, or research were founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose lands these projects that we're working on are located. So we come together today to acknowledge, to stand up for, and to give voice to the unceded lands and waters of the Chumash people and their elders and future generations. And I thank Mia Lopez, former tribal chair of the Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation, for working with me on this acknowledgement. So today's event features the launch of a research zine that addresses oil and climate justice concerns in our region and is intended to serve as an accessible resource for education and organizing. This is the culmination of one of many projects that UCSB students have been leading as part of a broader set of collaborations between UCSB and the Central Coast Climate Justice Network. C3JN, as it's called, is a network of social justice and environmental organizations and leaders committed to a climate movement that advances social, economic, and environmental justice for Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. Check our website out, just Google us. Now, I'd like to introduce my colleague and good friend and partner in crime, Emily Williams, who has been mentoring the students and doing extraordinary work in our community. Emily Williams is on the steering committee of 350 Santa Barbara and is the campaign coordinator for that organization's work on stopping new oil development in Santa Barbara County. She's also a PhD student and a National Science Foundation Fellow in the Department of Geography here at UCSB, where she works on climate accountability and climate justice. Emily, I'd like to turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David, partner in crime. Take you up on that. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm going to keep my remarks really quick because we have some awesome content to be getting to. But I just wanted to take a second to set a little bit of the context that we're going to be talking about, which I know Jessica and DaniRose are going to touch on. So first of all, if you're like me, so I came to Santa Barbara, this like white girl not knowing what was up and what was down about 10 years ago. And I just saw this environmental place, like everywhere was talking about environmentalism. But it wasn't until years later that I started to realize how much of that environmentalism is very superficial. So you may not know, but Santa Barbara County is one of the largest producers of oil in the state of California. And California itself is one of the largest producers of oil in the whole of the United States. This oil is not produced in primarily affluent areas. And as we know from a lot of other environmental fights and climate fights in general, it tends to be placed in areas that are going to affect lower income communities, which too often tend to be communities of color. So this environmental justice and environmental climate racism, right? Climate injustice is very much present in our county. I just wanted to give you a couple of numbers to sort of set the tone, which is a couple of years ago, the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, came out with a report that was saying, if we're going to avoid catastrophic climate change, what do we need to do? And they found that we need to curb emissions. We need to cut them in half over the next 10 years by 2030. That same year then, the International Energy Agency, hardly like a leftist organization, came out with a report and basically said, if we're going to do that, we can actually avoid catastrophic climate change so long as we build no new oil, gas, coal infrastructure. So no new fossil fuels, no new pipelines, no new wells, etc. And what we need instead, right, is we need a just transition. And so there's a lot of people working locally on this, some students as well, in thinking about how can we build a system that's not only addressing climate change, but also addressing all the intersecting crises that connect to climate change. So at this time, right, as we have our work cut out for us, there's a lot that we need to do to fight climate change, but also fight all the intersecting issues that touch on it, including systemic racism. There are oil companies who keep trying to build out new stuff in Santa Barbara County. And so we've had a couple of victories recently. 2 oil companies did just pull their proposals to drill collectively almost 400 new oil wells up in the northern part of the county. There's still one that's out remaining though, TerraCore Energy. And so we can talk about that a little bit later. So the last thing I'll say is just, in fighting these things, we have this very broad coalition of organizations. 350 is just one of the many who are working on this stuff. And collectively, we've been really pushing to do everything that we can to not only fight these projects, but also ensure that everyone has access to information. Because so often this information is presented in very technical ways that just don't allow community to engage. It's in English, it's in really, really long reports. Hearings are hard to access physically. They can be in the middle of the day. And so I just really wanted to commend the students because they've gotten involved in this collaboration and taking that information and putting it into a form that hopefully is much more accessible to folks so everyone can actually participate in democracy. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to pass it over to DaniRose and Jessica, who are going to take you on a whirlwind tour of oil in the county.
Thank you so much, Emily. Before we pass it over to DaniRose and Jessica, I actually want to make sure they get a proper introduction, if that's okay. Thank you for that outstanding analysis, context, and introduction, Emily. And he may think he's off camera, but Theo LeQuesne, Dr. Theo LeQuesne is right there, your true partner in crime and in life, a recent PhD in the Department of Global Studies at UCSB, also a fossil-free UC campaigner on all aspects of climate justice in California globally, and has also been deeply involved in this project. So thank you, Theo, and welcome. I also want to thank all of you here for attending this Zoom seminar, the audience there. Please note that at any time you can send in a comment or a question for our presenters by simply clicking on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and typing in a comment or a question. And so Jessica and DaniRose will first make their presentation, then we'll open it up for Q&A and discussion. And so I'd like to give them an introduction. DaniRose Hill is a recent graduate from UCSB who was awarded a Bachelor of Arts degree in Environmental Studies and a minor in Black Studies with academic distinction. Throughout her time at UCSB, she worked and volunteered in many environmental and ecology settings, attending a field studies program in Belize, for example, working as a fire ecology field technician after the Thomas fires, and interning for the IV Surfrider chapter. However, in her last 2 years, she's followed her passion and has shifted her area of focus more towards social justice. And so after graduation, and congratulations on your recent graduation, DaniRose, she plans to keep learning about the intersections between and among racial, social, and environmental injustices. Jessica Bixby is a recent graduate as well from our environmental studies program at UCSB and is an art minor with academic and outstanding service distinctions. She spent the last 4 years volunteering and working with GIVE, which is an organization focused on sustainable development and global citizenship. She also enjoyed being involved in local gardening and composting projects like the IV Compost Collective and Hope Refuge Gardens. This past year, her environmental career honed in on social justice alongside her housemate and good friend, DaniRose. And so going forward, Jessica plans to continue working with local community leaders as an activist for environmental and social justice. Emily mentioned problems with language justice, and we are attuned to that and trying to do better and working on that. And so we are fortunate to have Maria Lozano here, who is our translator for the zine, and who will be doing live translation. Maria is a recent graduate from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in political science and a certificate from the TMP, the Technology Management Program. During her time at the university, she interned with various nonprofit organizations focusing on amplifying the voices of marginalized groups through art, through resources, through education, including groups like the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, Earth Justice, and many others. She has also advocated for sexual assault justice for migrant women. After graduation, she hopes to continue working and organizing within her local area for the Latin American community. So please give a warm welcome to DaniRose, Jessica, and Maria. Take it away, please.
Thank you for the beautiful introductions, David and Emily. I think we're about ready to hop into it, but before we do, I just wanted to say a few quick words. We all know that keeping up with local issues is good for us. Reading reports and research and newspapers, for any engaged citizen, which all of you are if you're here, this is like eating your vegetables. However, not everyone has the time or energy to do this, especially given the heavy increase in domestic labor that many of us are experiencing during COVID-19. So our goal with the Zine was to make all of this research as accessible and digestible as possible for everyone right now. Because even in the midst of a pandemic and the largest civil rights movement this world has ever seen, oil companies are not sleeping. Whether or not we pay attention to them, they're forging on, building, drilling, expanding, and we must stay vigilant. All the crises taking place, the anti-Blackness, the pandemic, and the climate, are inextricably connected, and as we go forward, we must remember in all the work that we do that there cannot be environmental justice without racial justice. Ready to get into it, Jess?
Yeah, Maria, do you want to translate that really quickly before we move forward?
Yeah. Buenas tardes todos. Nuestro objetivo con esta mini revista es hacer que esta investigación sea lo más accesible posible para todos en este momento. Porque incluso en medio de una pandemia y el movimiento de derechos civiles más grande que este mundo ha visto, las compañías petroleras no están durmiendo. Ya sea que les prestemos atención o no, están avanzando, construyendo, perforando y expandiéndose. Y debemos permanecer vigilantes. Todas las crisis que se están produciendo, que sea la lucha contra la comunidad negra, la pandemia y la crisis climática, están conectadas. Y a medida que avanzamos, debemos recordar en todo el trabajo que hacemos que no puede haber justicia ambiental sin justicia racial.
All right, I will share my screen and let's get this thing going. How are we looking? Are we good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is our zine, and it is Tracing the Footsteps of Onshore Oil, a research zine by DaniRose Hill and Jessica Bixby, translated by Maria Fernanda Lozano.
Rastreando los pasos del petróleo en tierra, un folleto de investigación por DaniRose Hill y Jessica Bixby, traducido por María Fernanda Lozano.
Oil, a viscous liquid derived from petroleum, especially for use as a fuel or lubricant.
Aceite, un líquido derivado del petróleo especialmente utilizado como combustible o lubricante.
If you live in Santa Barbara County, you likely see some part of the oil production process every day. If you're on the coast, maybe you look out and see the oil rigs that line the horizon. If you're inland, maybe you pass oil wells.
Si vives en el condado de Santa Bárbara, es probable que veas parte del proceso de producción de petróleo todos los días. Si estás en la costa, tal vez mires hacia afuera y veas las plataformas petroleras que bordean el horizonte. Si estás tierra adentro, quizás pases pozos de petróleo.
Like most Californians, oil is a part of our everyday lives in Santa Barbara County. We currently rely on it to keep our lives running smoothly. It fuels our cars, it's the base of the plastics we use, and it's found in everything from asphalt to cosmetics to textiles.
Como la mayoría de californianos, el petróleo forma parte de nuestra vida cotidiana en el condado de Santa Bárbara. Actualmente confiamos en él para mantener nuestras vidas funcionando sin problemas. Alimenta nuestros automóviles, es la base de los plásticos que utilizamos, se encuentra en todo desde asfalto hasta los cosméticos y los textiles.
However, most of us have never really thought about oil. Where does it come from? What communities does it pass through? These questions got two curious UCSB students thinking. What if we tracked onshore oil from the time it was extracted from Santa Barbara County to the time it was consumed? This is the story of our journey to answer that question.
Sin embargo, la mayoría de nosotros nunca hemos realmente pensado en el petróleo. ¿De dónde viene? ¿Por cuáles comunidades pasa? Esas preguntas hicieron pensar a dos estudiantes curiosas de la Universidad de California en Santa Bárbara. ¿Qué pasaría si rastreáramos el petróleo en tierra desde el momento en que se extrajo del condado de Santa Bárbara hasta el momento que se consumió? Esta es la historia de ese viaje.
Step 1, finding the oil. We quickly found out that most of the oil extracted from Santa Barbara County isn't normal oil. When you imagine oil, you probably think of something fluid and slippery, like the gas you put into your car, something you could suck up into a straw. This kind of oil is called light crude oil.
Paso 1, el aceite. Rápidamente descubrimos que la mayoría del petróleo extraído del condado de Santa Bárbara no es petróleo normal. Cuando imagina el petróleo, probablemente piensa en algo fluido y resbaladizo, como el gas que le pone a su automóvil, algo que podrías absorber por un popote. Este tipo de petróleo se llama petróleo crudo ligero.
Throughout a century of conventional oil drilling in South Central California, industries have used up almost all of the easily accessible light crude oil. Now, oil industries in Essex County are forced to extract a much more inefficient and polluting oil. This is called heavy crude oil. Heavy crude oil is significantly more expensive to produce than light crude because it costs more to refine and turn into valuable products.
A lo largo de un siglo de perforación petrolera convencional en el centro-sur de California, las industrias han utilizado casi todo el petróleo ligero de fácil acceso. Ahora las industrias petroleras en el condado de Santa Bárbara están buscando extraer un petróleo que es mucho más ineficiente y contaminante. Esto se llama crudo pesado. El crudo pesado es significativamente más caro de producir que el crudo ligero porque cuesta más extraer, refinar y convertir a productos utilizables.
The onshore oil in Santa Barbara County is also known as sour oil. Crude oils are sweet or sour depending on their sulfur content. The more sulfur crude oil has, the more sour or undesirable it becomes. This is because sulfuric oil is costly, dangerous, and polluting to extract and refine.
El petróleo en tierra en el condado de Santa Bárbara también se conoce como aceite agrio. Los aceites son dulces o agrios dependiendo en su contenido de azufre. Cuando más azufre tiene el petróleo crudo, más agrio o indeseable se vuelve. Esto se debe a que el aceite sulfúrico es costoso, peligroso y contaminante para extraer y refinar.
Sulfur bonds to hydrogen to create hydrogen sulfide, a molecule sometimes found in lethal concentration in Santa Barbara County oil wells. The release of this gas during extraction threatens the safety of oil workers. Additionally, the high sulfur content causes the formation of sulfur dioxide in the event of crude oil fires, which causes detrimental respiratory health effects for those nearby.
El azufre se une al hidrógeno para crear el sulfuro de hidrógeno, una molécula que a veces se encuentra en látiles concentrándose en los pozos de petróleo del condado de Santa Bárbara. La liberación de este gas durante la extracción amenaza la seguridad de los trabajadores petroleros. Además, al alto contenido de azufre provoca la formación del dióxido de azufre. En el caso de incendios de petróleo crudo, es lo que causa efectos perjudiciales para la salud respiratoria de las personas cercanas.
In general, Santa Barbara County oil isn't the cream of the crop. It is both heavy and sour, making it costly, polluting, and dangerous to extract and refine. Extracting the viscous, heavy oil requires a host of extra processes that aren't required for light oil.
En general, el aceite en el condado de Santa Bárbara no es la crema de la cosecha. Es pesado y agrio, lo que lo hace costoso, contaminante y peligroso de extraer y refinar. La extracción de este petróleo espeso y pesado requiere una gran cantidad de procesos adicionales que no se requieren en el petróleo liviano.
Step 2, extracting the oil. When drilling light crude oil, a pump jack simply draws it from underground. However, for heavy crude oil projects, like many in Santa Barbara County, it's not that simple. These projects often require what's called enhanced oil recovery, specifically using cyclic steam injection and steam flooding. During these processes, enormous amounts of water are superheated to 500 degrees, transforming them into steam, and then shot underground to loosen the viscous crude oil that lies 2,000 to 5,000 feet below.
Paso 2. Extracción del petróleo. Al perforar petróleo crudo ligero, una bomba extractora simplemente lo extrae del subsuelo. Pero para proyectos de crudo pesado, como muchos en el condado de Santa Bárbara, no es tan simple. Estos proyectos a menudo requieren lo que se llama recuperación mejorada de petróleo, específicamente usando inyección de vapor cíclico e inundación de vapor. Durante estos procesos se sobrecalientan enormes cantidades de agua a 500 grados, transformándolos a vapor, y luego se disparan bajo tierra para aflojar el crudo viscoso que se encuentra entre 2.000 y 5.000 pies debajo.
The process of superheating this water is extremely energy intensive, requiring lots of natural gas to transform it into steam. Worse still is the highly contaminated wastewater left over from this process, which is injected into underground aquifers for disposal. This wastewater can contain heavy metals, hydrocarbons, and radioactive material. Once an aquifer becomes contaminated by this wastewater, it often becomes completely unusable for drinking or agricultural purposes.
El proceso de sobrecalentamiento de esta agua es extremadamente intensivo en energía y requiere mucho más gas para transformarlo en vapor. Peor aún, son las aguas residuales altamente contaminadas de este proceso que se inyectan en los acuíferos subterráneos para su eliminación. Estas aguas residuales pueden contener metales pesados, hidrocarburos y materiales radioactivos. Una vez que un acuífero se contamina con esas aguas residuales, a menudo se vuelven inutilizables para beber o para fines agrícolas.
Once the crude oil is dragged to the surface, it is still too thick to be used as oil on its own. It has to be combined with light crude oil to become useful. This again requires more fossil fuels.
Una vez que el petróleo crudo es arrastrado con éxito a la superficie, es todavía demasiado espeso para ser utilizado como petróleo por sí solo. Tiene que combinarse con petróleo crudo ligero para ser utilizable. Esto nuevamente requiere más combustibles fósiles.
So let's sum this up. It takes an immense amount of energy, usually powered by fossil fuels, to dredge heavy crude oil up from the ground. After it is extracted, heavy crude oil is so impure that it has to be mixed with significant amounts of light crude oil to become usable. That is a lot of fossil fuels being used to create more fossil fuels. A little paradoxical, huh? This practice is both financially costly and toxic for the environment.
Resumamos esto. Se necesita una inmensa cantidad de energía, generalmente impulsada por combustibles fósiles, para extraer petróleo crudo pesado del suelo. Después de que se extrae el petróleo crudo pesado, es tan impuro que tiene que mezclarse con cantidades significativas de petróleo crudo ligero para que se pueda utilizar. Es una gran cantidad de combustibles fósiles que se utilizan para crear más combustibles fósiles. Un poco paradójico, ¿a poco no? Esta práctica es a la vez financieramente costosa y tóxica para el medio ambiente.
Step 3, the cost of human life. We began to wonder who lived around these oil wells and how it affected them. We found our answers in Santa Maria. As it turns out, these oil wells aren't only toxic for the environment. Santa Maria residents have been paying the price of this oil with their health and their safety for decades.
Paso 3. El costo de la vida humana. Comenzamos por preguntándonos quién vive alrededor de estos pozos petroleros y cómo los afectó. Encontramos nuestras respuestas en Santa María. Como resultado, estos pozos de petróleo no solo son tóxicos para el medio ambiente. Los residentes de Santa María han estado pagando el precio de este aceite con su salud y seguridad durante décadas.
The region's oil operations deeply threaten Santa Maria's groundwater supply, which is used for both drinking water and agriculture. While the city of Santa Maria relies heavily on local groundwater for water supplies, Sisquoc, a community that lies just north of Cat Canyon, one of the largest onshore oil projects in the county, relies entirely on this groundwater.
Las operaciones petroleras de la región amenazan profundamente al suministro de agua subterránea de Santa María, que se utiliza tanto para el agua potable como para la agricultura. Mientras que la ciudad de Santa María depende en gran medida de agua subterránea local para el suministro de agua, Sisquoc, una comunidad que se encuentra en el norte de Cat Canyon, uno de los mayores proyectos de petróleo en tierra en el condado, depende completamente de esta agua subterránea.
Let's take a step back. Santa Maria is an agricultural town that lies in the northernmost part of Santa Barbara County. It has a 74.6% Latino population and has an average income of $19,000 per year compared to an average of $37,000 in Santa Barbara. Residents of Santa Maria have been politically and economically marginalized for years. as voices advocating for safe land and water are easily overpowered by money and industry.
Retrocedemos. Santa María es una ciudad agrícola que se encuentra en la parte más septentrional del condado de Santa Bárbara. Tiene una población latina del 74.6% y tiene un ingreso promedio de 19.647 por año en comparación con el promedio de 37.692 por año en Santa Bárbara. Residentes de Santa María han sido marginados políticamente y económicamente durante años. Un lugar donde las voces que abogan por tierra y agua seguras son fácilmente dominadas por el dinero y la industria.
Despite the fact that existing scientific research proposes a 2,500-foot setback between all oil and gas operations and homes, many residents live much closer. At a Santa Maria public meeting, a representative of CAUSE explained, "We have children here who can practically kick a ball to oil drilling machines near their backyards."
A pesar del hecho de que la investigación científica existente propone un retroceso de 2.500 pies entre todas las operaciones de petróleo y gas y los hogares, muchos residentes viven mucho más cerca. En una reunión pública de Santa María, un representante de CAUSE explicó: "Aquí tenemos niños que pueden patear una pelota no lo suficientemente lejos como para encontrarse con una máquina perforadora."
The oil wells pose a massive threat to the health of Santa Maria residents. Drilling through the Santa Maria groundwater basin, a series of aquifers that connect all the way from the San Rafael Mountains to the Pacific Ocean, is extremely risky. In areas where oil companies actively pursue new drilling permits, aquifers used for drinking water are as close to 500 feet away in certain places. This practice threatens to contaminate the county's groundwater resources, which residents rely on for clean land, food, and water.
Los pozos petroleros representan una amenaza masiva para la salud de los residentes de Santa María. Perforar a través de la cuenca de aguas subterráneas de Santa María una serie de acuíferos que se conectan desde las montañas de San Rafael hasta el Océano Pacífico es extremadamente riesgoso. En esta área donde las compañías petroleras buscan activamente nuevos permisos de perforación, los acuíferos utilizados para el agua potable están a 500 pies de distancia en ciertos lugares. Esta práctica amenaza con contaminar los recursos de agua subterránea del condado, de los cuales los residentes dependen para obtener tierra limpia, alimentos y agua.
These oil wells not only threaten local water sources, but they are also responsible for large amounts of air pollution. Large quantities of greenhouse gases are released during oil operations, specifically methane and carbon dioxide, which significantly contribute to climate change.
Esos pozos de petróleo no solo amenazan las fuentes de agua locales, sino que también son responsables por las grandes cantidades de contaminación del aire. Se liberan grandes cantidades de gas de efecto invernadero durante las operaciones petroleras, específicamente metano y dióxido de carbón, que contribuyen al cambio climático.
Air pollution also poses a distinct threat to oil workers. For example, the Cat Canyon oil field 10 minutes south of Santa Maria contains significant hydrogen sulfide, releasing up to 100,000 parts per million during oil extraction. Although this sentence may not mean much to the average person, researchers explain that this amount of hydrogen sulfide in the air is well above lethal concentrations and poses a hazard to oil field workers.
También representan una amenaza distinta para los trabajadores petroleros. Por ejemplo, en el campo petrolífero Cat Canyon, a 10 millas al sur de Santa María, contienen sulfuro de hidrógeno significativo que libera hasta 100,000 partes por millón durante la extracción del petróleo. Aunque esta frase puede no significar mucho para la persona promedio, los investigadores explican que esta cantidad de sulfuro de hidrógeno en el aire está por muy encima de las concentraciones letales y representan un peligro para los trabajadores de los campos petroleros.
What we learned from our research in Santa Maria is that the cost of oil is much more than what we see on signs at gas stations. It made us wonder, how many of us would still fill our cars with gas every week if the cost was measured in life's loss rather than dollar signs?
Lo que aprendemos de nuestra investigación en Santa María es que el costo de petróleo es mucho más de lo que vemos en los letreros de las gasolinerías. nos hizo preguntarnos cuántos de nosotros todavía llenaríamos nuestros automóviles con gasolina cada semana si el costo se midiera en vidas perdidas en lugar de signos de dólar.
Step 4, transporting the oil. After the heavy crude is extracted from Santa Maria, it is transported to Kern County. This transportation means hours of dangerous trucking where toxic spills can and do happen, threatening to pollute surrounding land and water on this journey. As evidenced by the recent tanker truck crash and spill of over 4,500 gallons of crude oil into the Koyama River, the remaining Cat Canyon proposals constitutes major threats to our water, wildlife, and communities, said Ken Ho, Executive Director of SB Can in the release.
Paso 4. Transporte del petróleo. Después de que el crudo pesado se extrae de Santa María, se transporta al condado de Kern. Este transporte significa horas de transporte peligroso, donde los derrames tóxicos pueden ocurrir y lo hacen, y amenaza con contaminar la tierra y el agua circundante. Como lo demuestra el reciente accidente de un camión cisterna y el derrame de más de 4.500 galones de petróleo crudo en el río Cuyama, las propuestas restantes de Cat Canyon constituyen amenazas importantes para nuestra agua, vida silvestre y comunidades.
On top of this, carbon emissions from these tanker trucks pollute the air significantly. A report estimated that the combined effect of these 3 proposed oil projects for Cat Canyon would require their tanker trucks to travel a whopping 12 million miles per year collectively. On these trips, environmental and physically harmful volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxides, carbon dioxide, and particulate matter are released into the air as a result of burning gas and diesel fuel. This is an additional burden impacting human health, and poor and disadvantaged communities are usually located in and near neighborhoods that surround major transportation facilities.
Además de esto, las emisiones de carbón de estos camiones cisterna contaminan el aire significativamente. Un informe estimó que los efectos combinados de 3 proyectos petroleros propuestos para Cat Canyon requerían que sus camiones cisternas viajen la floreja de 12 millones de millas por año colectivamente. En estos viajes, los compuestos orgánicos volantes nocivos para el medio ambiente y físicamente, los óxidos de nitrógeno, el dióxido de carbón y las partículas se liberan al aire como resultado de la quema de gasolina y combustible diésel. Esta es una carga adicional que afecta a la salud humana y las comunidades pobres y desfavorecidas generalmente que se encuentran dentro y cerca de los vecinos que rodean las principales instalaciones de transporte.
Step 5, refining the oil. The crude oil is sent far, far away from Santa Barbara to undergo the most toxic part of the oil production process, refinement. This primarily happens in Kern County, Bakersfield, where 22.6% of residents live below the federal poverty line. This region has been listed as the most polluted in the country by year-round particle pollution.
Paso 5. Refinación del petróleo. El petróleo crudo se envía lejos, muy lejos de Santa Bárbara, para someterse a la parte más tóxica del proceso de petróleo, el refinamiento. Esto ocurre principalmente en el condado de Kern-Bakersfield, donde el 22.6% de los residentes viven debajo del umbral federal de pobreza. Esta región ha sido catalogada como la más contaminada del país por la contaminación por partículas durante todo el año.
The dirtiest parts of oil production takes place in communities that do not reap the benefits of our energy consumption, but instead face the toxic dangers of the oil refining process. In other words, this is an example of environmental injustice. Oil companies target these vulnerable populations in agricultural regions such as Kern County, where the population is largely immigrant, low income, and people of color.
Las partes más sucias de la producción de petróleo tienen lugar en las comunidades que no cosechan los beneficios de nuestro consumo de energía, sino que enfrentan los peligros tóxicos del proceso de refinación del petróleo. En otras palabras, este es un ejemplo de injusticia ambiental. Las compañías petroleras se dirigen a estas poblaciones vulnerables y regiones agrícolas, específicamente donde la comunidad que habita el condado de Kern es en gran parte inmigrante, de bajos ingresos y personas de color.
In Kern County, water sources are at a risk from contamination with unsafe extraction practices and tanker truck spills. Their water is dangerous to drink. Anthropogenic human-caused particulates cause severe air pollution. Their air is dangerous to breathe. Crops are grown with contaminated water and soil. Of the food, fiber, and foliage grown and produced in Kern County, 38 million California residents consume this food. Our food is dangerous to eat. These are basic human rights: safe food to eat, clean water to drink, and clean air to breathe.
En el condado de Kern, las fuentes de agua están en riesgo de contaminación con prácticas de extracción inseguras y derrames de camiones cisterna. Su agua es peligrosa de beber. Las partículas antropogénicas causadas por humanos causan una severa contaminación del aire. Su aire es peligroso para respirar. Los cultivos se riegan con agua y suelo contaminados. De la comida, fibra o follaje cultivado y producido en el condado de Kern, 38 millones de residentes de California consumen esta comida. Nuestra comida es peligrosa de comer. Estos son derechos básicos: alimentos seguros para comer, agua potable para beber y aire limpio para respirar.
Refining the heavy sulfuric oil extracted from SB County requires a lot of cracking, a process that breaks down hydrocarbons and transforms heavy crude into valuable byproducts. Although refineries attempt to contain the physically dangerous pollutants, such as sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide released during cracking, thousands of pounds of these pollutants are typically emitted into the environment over the course of 1 year. Through equipment leaks, high temperature combustion during burning of fuels for electricity generation, the heating of steam and process fluids, and the transfer of crude oil products. In other words, these pollutants inevitably leak out and endanger refinery workers and the surrounding community.
La refinación de aceite sulfúrico pesado extraído del condado de Santa Barbara requiere una gran cantidad de craqueo, un proceso que descompone los hidrocarburos y transforma el crudo pesado a subproductos más valiosos. Aunque las refinerías intentan contener los contaminantes físicamente peligrosos, como el dióxido de azufre y el sulfuro de hidrógeno, liberados durante el agrietamiento, miles de libras de estos contaminantes se emiten típicamente en el medio ambiente en el transcurso de un año, a través de fugas de equipos, combustión a alta temperatura durante la quema de combustibles para la generación de electricidad, el calentamiento de vapor y fluidos de proceso y la transferencia de productos de petróleo crudo. En otras palabras, estos contaminantes inevitablemente se escapan y ponen en peligro a los trabajadores de las refinerías y la comunidad circundante.
Step 5, transporting oil again. After the crude oil has been transformed and refined through extensive processes in Santa Maria and Kern County, it is often transported to LA, San Francisco, or even Texas for further refining, which causes additional emissions and risk of oil spills. After polluting land, water, food, and air, the oil has finally reached its destination, us.
Paso 5. Transporte de petróleo nuevamente. Después de que el petróleo crudo se haya transformado y refinado a través del proceso extenso en Santa María y luego en el condado de Kern, a menudo se transportan a Los Ángeles, San Francisco o incluso Texas para su posterior refinación, lo que provoca emisiones adicionales y riesgo de derrames de petróleo. Después de contaminar la tierra, el agua, los alimentos y el aire, el petróleo finalmente ha llegado a su destino, nosotros.
Step 6, now what? We currently use this oil to fuel industry and transportation with blissful ignorance of the burden it has placed on both our neighboring communities and our planet. Why we should care. In tracing the footsteps of onshore oil, we have uncovered that Santa Barbara County onshore oil production contaminates groundwater sources, disproportionately pollutes marginalized communities with toxic emissions, and contributes to climate change. Note that this is just one root of many that occur within our county, and it serves as a microcosm of larger oil networks and their injustices that take place all over the world.
Paso 6. ¿Y ahora qué? Actualmente utilizamos este aceite para alimentar la industria y el transporte con una ignorancia maravillosa de la carga que han impuesto tanto a nuestras comunidades vecinas como al planeta. ¿Por qué deberíamos cuidarnos? Debemos cuidarnos. Al rastrear los pasos del petróleo en tierra, hemos descubierto que la producción del petróleo del condado de Santa Bárbara contamina las fuentes de aguas subterráneas, contamina desproporcionadamente a las comunidades ya marginadas con emisión tóxicas y contribuyen al cambio climático. Tenga en cuenta que esto es solo una de las muchas rutas que ocurren dentro de nuestro condado y sirve como un microcosmo de redes petroleras más grandes y sus injusticias que tienen lugar en todo el mundo.
At this point, you may be wondering why these communities tolerate oil. If we know it's dangerous, and the residents of Santa Barbara County and Kern County know it's dangerous, then why don't we all just say no? It's critical to understand that these communities may not like oil, but they are dependent on it. Their communities and livelihoods have been built around this toxic substance.
En este punto puede que se pregunte por qué estas comunidades toleran el petróleo si sabemos que es peligroso y los residentes del condado de Santa Bárbara y el condado de Kern saben que es peligroso. ¿Por qué decimos que no? Es fundamental comprender que estas comunidades pueden no gustarles el petróleo, pero dependen de él. Sus comunidades y sus medios de vida se han construido alrededor de esta sustancia tóxica.
75% of California's oil is produced in Kern County in the San Joaquin Valley, which is the largest oil-producing county in the country. 95% of fracking in the state takes place in Kern County, and this practice and these oil companies are focused on expansion. The economy of Kern County and those of many other regions rely on both the oil and agricultural industries. However, the pollution produced by the oil industry threatens to toxify the very foundation of agriculture, its soil and water.
El 75% del petróleo de California se produce en el condado de Kern en el Valle de San Joaquín, que es el condado productor de petróleo más grande del país. El 95% de fracking en el estado tiene lugar en el condado de Kern y esta práctica y estas compañías petroleras se concentran en la expansión. Las economías de regiones como el condado de Kern dependen del petróleo y la agricultura, mientras que la industria petrolera amenaza a la industria agrícola debido a la toxicidad que impone.
It is not enough to just say no to oil. We cannot strip these communities of their primary source of income, even if it is with the intention of creating a green economy, and just expect them to carry on unharmed or unbothered. We must create a just transition for these communities, meaning that we must create safer, cleaner, and more equitable work environments for residents in place of oil.
No es suficiente decir simplemente no al petróleo. No debemos despojar a estas comunidades de su fuente principal de ingresos, incluso si es con la intención de crear una economía verde y solo esperar que continúen ilesos o sin molestias. Debemos crear una transición justa para esas comunidades, lo que significa que debemos crear seguros más limpios y entornos de trabajo más equitativos para los residentes en lugar del petróleo.
This is what we call a just transition, and that is a vision where we shift from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. We must build a coalition to push for economic and political power around a unifying, holistic, and waste-free way of living. A just transition must first take appropriate measures to ensure jobs for all people working in the industry and the communities. As we put an end to fossil fuel extraction, we must ensure that every worker affected by this transition is guaranteed a new and equitable job and retirement.
Transición justa. Esta es una visión en la que cambiamos de una economía extractiva a una economía regenerativa. Debemos construir una coalición para impulsar el poder económico y político en torno a una forma de vida unificadora, holística y sin desperdicios. Una transición justa primero debe tomar las medidas apropiadas para garantizar empleos para todas las personas que trabajan en la industria y las comunidades. A medida que ponemos fin a la extracción de combustibles fósiles, debemos asegurarnos de que todos los trabajadores afectados por esta transición tengan garantizado un trabajo nuevo y equitativo y una jubilización.
By creating renewable energy, reformed infrastructure, increased public transportation, and adaptation projects to make communities more resilient to climate impacts, this transition will create hundreds of thousands of new jobs in California. This transition will require forward-thinking actions to provide clean and climate-safe energy. Most importantly, we have no community left behind throughout this transition. A just transition will require systematic change to ensure social and environmental justice is put at the forefront of this movement.
Al crear energía renovable, infraestructura reformada, mayor transporte público y proyectos de adaptación para hacer que las comunidades sean más resistentes al impacto climático, esta transición creará cientos de millones de nuevos empleos en California. Esta transición requiere acciones con visión de futuro para proporcionar energía limpia y segura para el clima. Lo más importante, no debemos dejar a ninguna comunidad atrás durante esta transición. Una transición justa requiere un cambio sistemático para garantizar que la justicia social y ambiental esté a la guardia de este movimiento.
You can aid a just transition by supporting the resilient activist groups born out of these communities that are confronting oil drilling, such as Committee for a Better Arvin in Kern County or Mixteco Indigenous Community Organizing Project in Santa Maria and Oxnard.
Puede ayudar a una transición justa apoyando a los grupos de activistas resilientes nacidos de estas comunidades que se enfrentan a la perforación petrolera, como Comité para un Mejor Arvin o Mixteco Indígena, una comunidad que se llama MICOP y está situado en Santa María y Oxnard.
These activist groups represent a just transition because they are comprised of local and often marginalized workers, parents, residents, and community members themselves. These groups promote procedural justice, a method that recognizes and prioritizes the voice of those who have been historically excluded from the decision-making process. By listening to marginalized residents' unique experiences with oppression and following their lead, we can ensure that we are keeping their best interests at heart in our search for justice, rather than projecting our well-intended but often unhelpful desires onto them.
Estos grupos de activistas representan una transición justa, ya que están compuestos de trabajadores locales que igual son padres y residentes en estas comunidades. Estos grupos promueven la justicia procesal, un método que reconoce y prioriza las voces de aquellos que han sido históricamente excluidos del proceso de toma de decisiones. Al escuchar las experiencias únicas de residentes que han sido marginados y seguir su liderazgo y ejemplo, podemos asegurar de mantener sus mejores intereses en nuestra búsqueda de justicia, en lugar de proyectar nuestros deseos bien intencionados, pero a menudo que no los ayuda completamente.
Addressing COVID-19. During this global pandemic, California Governor Newsom and CalGEM have already quietly approved 24 new fracking permits for the first time in 9 months, including permits to Era Energy for oil well stimulation in Kern County.
¿Cómo abordar COVID-19? Durante esta pandemia global, el gobernador de California, Newsom, y CalGEM han aprobado en silencio 24 nuevos permisos de fracking, por primera vez en 9 meses, incluyendo permiso a Era Energy para la estimulación de pozos petroleros en el condado de Kern.
Coronavirus patients in areas with high levels of air pollution are more likely to die from the infection than patients in part of the country with lower pollution levels. Therefore, communities such as Santa Maria and Kern, where daily fossil fuel activities occur, face disproportionate risks from this global pandemic.
Los pacientes con coronavirus en áreas con altos niveles de contaminación del aire tienen más probabilidades de morir por la infección que los pacientes en partes del país con niveles más bajos de contaminación. Por lo tanto, las comunidades como Santa María y Kern, donde se realizan las actividades diarias de combustibles fósiles, enfrentan riesgos desproporcionados de esta pandemia global.
Refining fossil fuels releases air pollution that threatens the climate and physically endangers humans. A 2019 study revealed that air pollution is responsible for 8.8 million deaths each year. Additionally, this air pollution makes people more susceptible to respiratory illnesses like COVID. Looking into the SARS epidemic in China, patients with high air pollution were twice as likely to die from SARS than patients living in regions with cleaner air.
No solo liberamos gases de efecto invernadero a través de la quema de combustibles fósiles para obtener energía, sino que también agregamos contaminación al aire. A partir de un estudio de 2019, la contaminación del aire es responsable de 8.8 millones de muertes cada año. Además, esta contaminación del aire hace que las personas sean más susceptibles a las enfermedades respiratorias. Al analizar la epidemia de SARS en China, los pacientes con alta contaminación del aire tienen el doble de probabilidad de morir de SARS que los pacientes que viven en regiones con aire más limpio.
Allowing oil permits in the time of a respiratory pandemic, COVID-19, is reckless. Increased toxic chemicals are only going to aggravate this this global climate and public health crisis. Climate change has been firmly linked to skyrocketing rates of infectious disease, as loss of biodiversity, destruction of wilderness, and warming temperatures have pushed farms and people closer to the wild. Therefore, we can expect diseases like COVID-19 to develop more rapidly as climate disruption continues. Permitting new drilling increases this risk of rising disease and intensifies the toxic burdens that frontline communities face.
Permitir permisos de petróleo en el momento de una pandemia respiratoria COVID-19 es imprudente. El aumento de los productos químicos tóxicos solo van a agravar este clima global y la crisis de salud pública. El cambio climático se ha vinculado firmemente a tasas vertiginosas de enfermedades infecciosas, ya que la pérdida de biodiversidad, la destrucción de la vida silvestre y el calentamiento de las temperaturas han llevado a las granjas y personas más cercanas a lo salvaje. Por lo tanto, podemos esperar que enfermedades como COVID-19 se desarrollen más rápidamente a medida que continúan la alteración del clima. Permitir nuevas perforaciones aumenta este riesgo de aumento de enfermedades e intensifica las cargas tóxicas que enfrentan las comunidades de primera línea.
The pandemic disproportionately affected marginalized communities serves as an example of environmental injustice. In this way, the inequalities created by COVID-19 only reflect the latest chapter in a long, ongoing struggle to secure environmental justice for these communities.
La pandemia que afecta desproporcionadamente a las comunidades marginadas sirve como un excelente ejemplo de injusticia ambiental. De esta manera, las desigualdades creadas por COVID-19 solo reflejan el último capítulo en una lucha larga y continua para garantizar la justicia ambiental para estas comunidades.
Call to action. Now is time to demand action and urge our government and local leaders to 1. Stop all new oil permitting in California. 2. Drop existing production through a just transition that would protect the livelihoods of fossil fuel workers. And 3. Initiate the process by rolling out a 2,500-foot health and safety buffer zone between oil drilling and the spaces where communities live, work, learn, and play.
Llamada de acción. Ahora es el momento de exigir acción a instar a nuestro gobierno y líderes locales a, número 1, detener los nuevos permisos de petróleo en California. Número 2, dejar la producción existente a través de una transición justa que protege los medios de vida de los trabajadores de combustibles fósiles. Y número 3, iniciar un proceso a los alrededores de las zonas de amortiguamiento de seguridad y salud de 2.500 pies, entre donde pueden ocurrir la extracción de petróleo y donde las comunidades viven, trabajan, aprenden y juegan.
Everyone has an opportunity to make a difference in their local energy industry. Here are some resources that will help you stay informed on how you can contribute to a more just, equitable, and sustainable future. Check out these incredible organizations that operate in Santa Barbara and Central California.
Todos tienen la oportunidad de marcar la diferencia en su industria energética local. Aquí hay algunos recursos que lo ayudarán a mantenerse informados sobre lo que puede contribuir a un futuro más justo, equitativo y sostenible. Estas son 3 organizaciones de muchas que son locales en Santa Bárbara y California Central.
These orgs are Last Chance Alliance, CAUSE, the Center of Race, Poverty, and the Environment, Líderes Campesinas, and Food and Water Watch.
Estas organizaciones son The Last Chance Alliance, CAUSE, el Centro de Raza, Pobreza y Medio Ambiente, Líderes Campesinas, Vigilancia de Agua y Comida.
Lastly, it is critical to remember that it is the job of our local government representatives to represent us. When they do not represent the public's best interests, and particularly when they fail to protect the human rights of marginalized groups, the right to clean air, land, and water, the right to protect one's body and family from invasive pollution, then they have failed at their job. We must continue to use our voices and hold these representatives accountable. This looks like calling local officials, protesting safely with a mask, emailing, attending public or online meetings, signing petitions, and of course, voting.
Por último, es fundamental recordar que el trabajo de nuestros representantes locales es representarnos. cuando no nos representan los mejores cuando no representan los mejores intereses del público y particularmente cuando no protegen los derechos humanos de los grupos marginados, el derecho a limpiar el aire, la tierra y el agua, el derecho a proteger el cuerpo y la familia de la contaminación invasiva, entonces han fallado a su trabajo. Debemos continuar usando nuestras voces y responsabilizar a estos representantes. Eso se parece a llamar a funcionarios locales, protestar de forma segura con una máscara, enviar correos electrónicos, a asistir a reuniones públicas o en línea, peticiones y finalmente votar.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to go on this journey with us to trace the footsteps of onshore oil. In these trying times, it can sometimes feel impossible to make a difference, but by simply recognizing yourself as a change maker, you have already taken the first step towards making a brighter, safer future for all. And remember, if you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito.
Gracias por tomarse el tiempo de su día para aprender en este viaje con nosotros, para seguir los pasos del petróleo en tierra. En estos tiempos difíciles, a veces puede parecer imposible hacer una diferencia, pero simplemente conociéndote a ti mismo como un creador de cambios, ya has dado el primer paso para hacer un futuro más brillante y seguro para todos. Y recuerda, si crees que eres demasiado pequeño para marcar una diferencia, trata de dormir con un mosquito.
Thank you all. We first want to acknowledge that UC Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara County are located on indigenous Chumash ancestral lands and waters. Thank you so much to our Climate Justice Pedagogy Lab peers for supporting us through the past 2 quarters of tracing the footsteps of onshore oil. Thank you to Maria Fernanda Lozano and Daisy Perez for translating the Zine into Spanish. With only a week's notice, you inspire us. We want to give an especially humongous thank you to Emily Williams, Theo and David Pellow, Theo LeQuesne and David Pellow for their incredible guidance and drive to challenge us as young researchers and activists. Finally, we want to thank the amazing and resilient communities that gave us toxic tours and introduced us to many amazing organizations and resources. We will continue to fight by your side for social and environmental justice.
Gracias. Queremos reconocer a la Universidad de Santa Bárbara y el Condado de Santa Bárbara. Están localizadas en el territorio indígena de las tribus ancestrales Chumash. Estamos agradecidos con nuestros compañeros de laboratorio por apoyarnos los últimos 6 meses en rastrear los pasos del petróleo en tierra. Gracias María Fernanda Lozano y Daisy Perez por traducir este folleto en español con solo un aviso corto, nos han inspirado. Un fuerte gracias en especial para Emily Williams y Theo y David Pellow por guiar, retar y mover los investigadores y activistas. Finalmente, queremos agradecer a todas las comunidades resistentes y asombrosas que nos dieron guías tóxicas y nos presentaron a organizaciones y recursos. Continuaremos con ustedes peleando para hacer justicia social y mejorar el medio ambiente.
Yay, thank you guys so much for everyone who came out and listened and supported. With that, we are going to open up a bit of a Q&A and conversation for anyone who wants to stick around and ask questions. We also want to introduce a few people because we feel that they may be able to answer some of these questions with their experiences and expertise and want them to be part of this conversation. The other panelists we have with us today is Dr. Rosanna Esparza, who is a gerontologist and independent environmental health researcher. We have Ana Rosa Rizo, who is the former mayor of Maywood and senior organizer at Food and Water Watch, California. We have Jeremias Salazar, who is the organizer for Food and Water Watch and also works at UCSB with us. So thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll open the floor for questions.
Tenemos aquí a 3 representantes para contestar sus preguntas. Tenemos a doctora Rosanna Esparza, gerontóloga e investigadora independiente de salud ambiental, Jeremias Salazar, organizador de vigilancia de comida y agua, y Ana Rosa Rizo, ex alcalde de Maywood y organizadora ejecutiva de la vigilancia de comida y agua.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us today, Jessica and DaniRose. And thank you, Maria, for an excellent live translation. This is an amazing project that you should all be really proud of. Wide-ranging, and of course, as an academic, I love you've got the citations, heavy on the research, but also super accessible in the text and the graphics. You're getting a lot of love from folks out there in our audience, and so I want to get to those questions. I do want to remind our audience and attendees that you can, as some have already done, post a question on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And thanks again to our other guests, Rosa, Emily, Theo, Rosanna, Jeremias, and anyone else out there I may have forgotten. So let's open it up for questions. I'm gonna, Jess and DaniRose, feel free to jump in and bogard, but I was gonna just jump to the first couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And actually we have a number of comments, both Rachel Altman and Carolyn Goldwasser have commented on the amazing text and the artwork. So thank you, Rachel and Carolyn. Carolyn has a specific question. She says, you write about cracking and fracking. Both are mentioned here. Is that a typo, or are these two different processes? Can someone help us with that?
Yeah, so cracking is part of oil refinement and fracking is part of oil extraction. So they're both toxic, but they are both at different parts of the oil production process.
Thank you. Excellent. What else do we got here? A number of questions coming in. Another question, you mentioned, of course, the oil, the energy, the agricultural and water and food nexus here. So a question from Carolyn is, can we produce all the food we need here in our own county of Santa Barbara? Would that be possible? Anybody want to tackle that question? I don't know if Ana Rosa or anyone else. Are we self-sufficient? Can we be self-sufficient with respect to food production?
I actually was having a conversation with a friend a few days ago, and I'm pretty sure Santa Barbara is one of the only counties that has that potential, but I don't know if anyone else in the panelists has any more information on that.
Yeah, I think I can add a little bit to that. I think the Santa Maria area, including, Orchid, Guadalupe, it's growing in agriculture. I have lived here about 20 years, and the amount of food that's growing right now, it's way different compared to like 20 years ago. People would stay here a few months, work, and then they will have to follow the job, like move to Fresno, go to Oregon. But now a lot of people are staying here because the job opportunity is growing so much. And that's just agriculture.
Okay. Thank you for that answer, for helping us out there, Jeremias. Okay. And again, any of the panelists want to jump in at any time, no worries. Shayna just says, amazing job. See, we getting all sorts of love. Brett Bixby, wonder who he might be related to, asks, how can, and we've got a number of questions on this point, how can this zine be widely distributed to marginalized communities? Do we have a plan there?
We have the basis for that set up. We haven't checked in with him in a moment, but there is an activist named Ken Ho in Santa Maria, and he actually has a piece of a grant that he said he would be willing to use to help us produce these. And so we'll know more about how many we can produce, but ideally we would really love to be able to produce and present and offer them for free to places in Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, Kern County.
Yeah, he's the director of Santa Barbara County Action Network, and I'm actually on that board, so I'll definitely advocate for that to happen. Also, Jeremias is also talking to farm workers, and I've given him some masks for PPE distribution, and I was thinking in the process of distributing that PPE, if Ken Huff is able to help us get them printed, then he can go ahead and disseminate those at the same time that he's passing out the PPE.
I have a question. Is it, are you guys able to print this in Spanish, like what we had?
Yes.
They actually posted a link to the Spanish version at the beginning, so they have both English and Spanish.
Okay, that's awesome. And I would like to maybe talk to Arsenio Lopez Arsenio, I'm not sure what's his last name, but he's the director of MyCop, which he might be able to be interested in also helping to print this in Spanish, or possibly, I mean, if we can get funds, even do it in Mixteco, other native indigenous languages to inform what's going on. That sounds awesome.
That would be amazing.
We will make that happen. Thank you so much, Jeremias, for that suggestion, and to Ana Rosa for connecting us, both of you, for connecting us to those resources. You know, a version of this question that people are asking about distribution and getting it out to the community, I think that you've already really begun to answer it, and that is, you know, so much of climate science and so much of the discourse and the language around climate change or climate disruption is really inaccessible to a lot of people, right? Heavy on the stats, heavy on the graphs. And what I see here with this zine is the exact opposite of that. This thing is so accessible. I mean, it just draws you in. The graphics, and you're getting a lot of love on that one. A lot of people are into the graphics, myself included. You know, as we know, one of the most exciting things that has happened in recent years has been a near complete takeover, thank goodness, of the climate movement by youth and the climate justice movement by youth. And so I wonder what your thinking is about that and how this zine will play to young people. If you could say a little bit more about that, because I think it would work very well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, art is such an incredible way of reaching wide audiences because it pulls more people in, and making things more digestible through splitting it up in a situation like this where it's actually a fun read rather than something that's an EIR report that's 200 pages long, and your average community member does not have time to go through that, or does not necessarily have the Spanish translation, etc. So just making it more accessible, I think that's a huge part of what this youth movement is about, and getting creative and finding new ways to reach people, because we really need everyone on board with these movements. Rosanna, I don't know if you want to mention what you just got awarded with, that artistic grant you were telling me about, because I feel like that goes along these lines, and that's an incredible direction that you guys are headed in.
Yes. Hi, everyone. This is Rosanna in Kern County. What we just received was a go-ahead moving forward with a collaboration with the Mural Arts Institute in Philadelphia. And this is a 2.5-3-year grant. And what we're doing is we are looking at the intersections of environmental justice and art, and how they come together, where they come together, and who are the people where we're doing it. And we're really excited about having this opportunity to collaborate with the Institute and talking to residents. What do they see? Students. Julie Maldonado is one of the individuals that we're collaborating with, so that we have a link to UC Santa Barbara. We also have Vivian Underhill at UC Santa Cruz, plus our CRPE, CCEJN, and CVAC folks here in the Central Valley. So we're really excited that we're finally becoming more aware that we have quite a bit to offer other communities in terms of the kinds of art and creativity, whether it's murals, film, an opportunity like a zine. This is great. I'm just really just floored by the work that you've done on this, and however we can help and support. I'd love to see something like this happen on some of these horrible, ugly school buildings where we don't have anything on them except, you know, graffiti. Let's put this up on a series of classrooms and just paint this whole thing so that we're getting it out to people in different ways. So I'm really excited about the opportunities, and really to continue to work and support the students at UCSB and UC Santa Cruz. Thank you.
Thank you for your support, Dr. Esparza, and for your leadership in the community. Really, really appreciate that, and for making available your space, your community space for UCSB students and community members to visit. Really appreciate that. Jess, Danny, did you want to follow up with anything before we get to the next question? We good? Okay. Let me see. We've got, I think Emily is getting back on with us in a moment. She just lost her internet connection. We've got a question for her that we'll get to in a moment. And congratulations, Rosanna, on that grant. That is incredibly exciting.
Oh, thanks.
That's wonderful. We have a question actually about the art, very appropriate. Someone is asking, Denny Steen says, whom do we have to thank for the excellent illustrations in this presentation? Can we share who that is? Is that you guys?
Jess and I split them 50-50. We've been working on them for months. So thank you so much, because we learned Illustrator to do these. Neither of us had any graphic design experience before starting this project.
That's Grandy.
Most impressive, most impressive. Fantastic. Okay, well, if we can continue with questions from our audience, we've got a question about sustainable energy alternatives. What kinds of sustainable energy alternatives are becoming accessible that could potentially replace oil as a fuel source? For example, are solar or wind power the primary potential sources? And I think this gets to the excellent discussion and part of the presentation where you talk about a just transition, right? Transitioning away from these ecocidal industries, these very, very environment endangering industries, and doing so in a way that doesn't only protect the environment, but protects and sustains our workers, our colleagues who are in these industries. So what say you? What sorts of alternatives? Anyone on the panel want to jump in on that?
Well, I could hop in real quick, and then if anyone wants to riff on this.
Welcome back, Emily.
All right, so we're, yeah, there are so many alternatives. I mean, first of all, I feel like when a lot of people think about renewable energy, we think about, for instance, you have renewable energy when the sun shines, the wind blows. Battery technology is getting a lot better. Also, we live in a very sunny place, and there's areas of California that are very windy too. And so we have those things. And so a lot of experts who know much more about this area than I do constantly look at this stuff and basically say, like, we have the renewable technology now. Like, that is not the problem that we're facing. Let's be clear, we can't do a one-to-one. So we can't keep consuming the same amount of energy and just replace it all with renewables, but it doesn't mean that we're going to have any worse quality of life. In a lot of ways, we'll have a better quality because we won't have as much climate change, we won't have as much pollution to deal with. But it means transforming our energy system. So having more energy efficient buildings, having more access to public transportation, things like that. So we need less energy. And then for the less energy that we would need to consume, renewables are there. They're 100% there. And again, it's solar, it's wind, it's the battery storage, and some other, clever forms that people are coming up with. I don't know if anyone will add anything else. But.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, since there are jobs within the oil industry that are represented by unions, I think it's very important for us who are climate activists to make sure that when we're fighting for these alternative energy projects, that there are project labor agreements attached to them so that it's not replacing union jobs for non-union jobs, and that it's high quality, standard of life where people get a good pay and benefits. So that's not just like a afterthought. That should be like integrated into the way we fight for these alternative energy projects.
Here, here. Thank you, Ana Rosa and Emily for enlightening us on those critical points. And also should point out that the two of you and many other folks who are on this call and some of our attendees have been working on researching and building support for and developing the ideas and the framework for People's Green New Deal in this region. And so I'm really, really pleased to see folks taking the lead on that important work. And that would speak directly to some of the ideas that you just broke down, Ana Rosa. Please, again.
Yeah, just wanted to shout out real quick for a lot of us who are involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, that there is actually a call tomorrow about how the Black Lives Matter movement intersects with the fair and just transition. It's at 5 o'clock tomorrow, so I can put the link in the chat if folks are interested in RSVPing for that. It's being put on by the Labor Network for Sustainability, who we've been working on to develop some ties with the labor community here on the Central Coast.
Excellent. Thank you for that connection, Ana Rosa. I have a question. Emily, we've got you on the line, so please stay with us. You, from Jackie Blackwell, is asking this question. First of all, says, great presentation to Jess, Danny, and Maria, but wanted to clarify a statistic that Emily shared at the beginning of her introduction. Is California the largest producer of oil in the United States? Could you care to comment on that?
Thank you for asking that. I have a problem with speaking too fast quite often. No, California is not the largest producer of oil. Depending on the year that you look at the stats and whether you're including offshore oil or not, it kind of ranges. So we're looking at somewhere between the 3rd largest producer and the 6th or 7th largest producer. But it's up there. It's really far up there.
All right, this is certainly a contest that we don't want to win. So I'll take number 6, then hopefully we'll get down to like 0 at some point. Thank you for clarifying that. Question from an anonymous attendee. Will the presentation be available on YouTube? Yes, we are recording and we will make it widely available. You know what, actually, I probably should get Jess and Danny's permission to do that. We can do that after. Okay, thumbs up. All right. All right, it'll be available. Susie asks a question. So the onshore and offshore battle, that dynamic continues. The recent permits that Gavin Newsom approved, is that onshore? And then another follow-up question is, are there proposals for more offshore? She goes on and says, I see 4 out there on the horizon. What are the chances of more offshore rigs going up? So multiple questions from Susie. Anyone want to tackle that?
So we were really focused on onshore oil for this project. And at the start of this project, there was a proposal, 3 different proposals for a total of 720 new oil wells onshore in Santa Barbara County. And now 400 of those have been rescinded, which is really good news. But you've still got 200 something that are pushing to be put in by, I think, Emily, do you know who it is?
Yeah, TerraCore. They used to be called ERG. They went bankrupt and then another company bought them up.
Yeah. And then as far as offshore goes, Emily probably knows more than I do, or Jess and I do on that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll pass it over to Theo actually, and then we could tag team on it.
Sure.
Okay.
So as I understand it, the recent permitting that Newsom is responsible for applies to 36 new fracking permits onshore. For the most part, oil expansion offshore is being pushed by the federal government. It is something that the state of California is opposing. So when we're talking about onshore, we're seeing Newsom really expand drilling. Permits have actually been higher under his first couple of years of his administration than the last couple of years of Governor Brown's administration. So that's really worrying to see that trajectory. But at least with the offshore oil, that is being tackled at the state level too. And we more have President Trump to thank for expansion there.
Yeah. And then the last thing I would say for the offshore oil is I really think as we're fighting these things, again, like this is the oil industry kind of on its last legs. And as DaniRose explained, we need the just transition to include all workers. I think the biggest fights that we're going to keep seeing are going to be the onshore ones. It's very expensive to drill more offshore. California also has some policies that makes it really hard to get the oil once you drill offshore back onshore. Most rigs that we have in the channel right now are actually in federal waters, so they're under federal jurisdiction. But really the only 3 ones that we're keeping an eye on right now are all owned by ExxonMobil. And they've, for instance, applied for this permit to truck a bunch of oil up Highway 101 that would allow them to turn their oil rigs back on. So when you talk about offshore, you get into these sort of like questions about transportation and jurisdiction and things like that. But I think it would be pretty difficult to get a new rig drilled at this point, as much as Trump might like to.
Okay, thank you for that learned response, bringing us up to speed on what's happening both locally, globally, and in the state of California. And yeah, many things to thank Trump for bringing us together. How about that, right? So we have another question here. This is from PJ, and PJ asks, did you have much pushback or many blockages from oil companies as you did your research? Jess, Danny, I don't know if that's a question that you can ask now, if that's something you expect in the future. What do you think?
I was going to say, so we didn't have any direct contact or pushback with oil companies while we were researching this. I do feel that if we experienced any pushback, it would probably be after this and after it was put onto YouTube. That being said, even if we didn't have direct contact, I could tell you that one form of resistance on their part, which was a huge nuisance, was the continual delay of environmental impact reports. Because I think to a certain extent, the statistics in environmental impact reports and all that information was really valuable to us. And the reports just kept being delayed month by month, which really, the environmental impact reports gave us the information about current oil proposals and how they were sizing up environmentally. So.
Okay.
And also on that same note, we are hoping to, because these EIRs, these environmental impact reports, are these 100 to 300 page long reports that these companies have to turn in order to get approved. And we want to make those a lot more accessible to communities and everyone, because a lot of the times they get approved without anyone knowing what's actually happening behind the scenes. So I think with the climate justice pedagogy lab that we are working in and have done this research under, that's another big goal that we're headed towards, is making those EIRs more accessible to the public.
Excellent. Yes, this is a very important question. You know, the oil industry isn't going to take this passively, so you know, be careful how you move forward with this. I'm with you all of the way, and you've got a whole community behind you. It was revealed recently, a journalist, Corbin Heyer, reported on the Chevron Corporation using a communications firm to badmouth the Green New Deal activism as not only super leftist, but super extremist. And in a very interesting twist, Chevron's communications arm says that the Green New Deal is an effort to undermine the movement for Black lives. And it's an effort to actually promote and perpetrate environmental racism in communities of color. So the dirty, slick, oily tricks continue, and we've got to be prepared for that. And that's just the beginning. Of course, we know that oil industries are deeply involved in human rights abuses and much more than that. So this is very important work, and I thank you for that. Thank you also again, Ana Rosa Rizo-Centino, for sending out that link to this conversation around Black workers and the just transition, and thinking about the importance of Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black lives, and its intersection with climate justice and environmental justice movements. Extremely important. That conversation again happening tomorrow, and you sent out that link, so many thanks. Let's see. Again, anybody else on the panel, feel free to join in and jump in at any time. We've got a question from Laura, who, let's see, asks, and I think we could go back to your zine, because I think you might answer this in the zine. When we leave this webinar today, great question, Laura. When we leave this webinar today, which, by the way, is so informative and engaging, she says, what do you think are the 2 or 3 most important actions that we can take to make a difference with respect to the particular onshore problems and causes that you're addressing in this zine? 2 or 3 most important actions that we might take away from this session.
All right, I'll start, and Danny can work with me on what I'm saying. But I think if you go back into the zine, what's really, really prevalent and important is holding your local officials accountable, especially with the movement we're going through right now with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's calling local representatives and officials and telling them what you want to see and what you're not seeing, and how they are not holding up to the standards that they may say that they are holding up to. So I think that, and the stop-drop role that we discussed in that, I think that's huge in terms of onshore oil, is making those baby steps happen in order to slowly and justly transition away from fossil fuel extraction, because you can't just say no. There's like so many steps that need to be taken and done in a way that we're not just acting on intention and causing more damage because of that.
And in the meantime, supporting activist and groups and organizations, specifically the ones we mentioned, with money or time volunteering is one of the best things that you can do, because we have people that are on the front lines putting in the work. They really just need support. They've been doing it for a long time too.
That's exactly right. Yeah, thank you. Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off, Danny?
Nope.
Okay.
Good to go.
Okay. You know, and on that note, in terms of the work that people have been doing in our region for many, many years, Rosa writes into the chat, she says, we need to develop a people's EIR, a people's environmental impact report. That's been a conversation that Rosa, Theo, Emily, and many of us on this call have been having for quite a while. I don't know if anybody wants to remark on that, a comment on that, Rosa perhaps, or others?
Yeah, no, just the same way that the zine made the information so much more accessible. I think that's what we need to do with the EIR and what we've been discussing. The question is how to do it, and also how to get the information out once we do develop a people's EIR. And I'm thinking about low power radio stations that exist throughout the state and how those could be ways of disseminating the information. For example, in Santa Barbara, we have KZAA, and we just started a YouTube channel. So I was wondering if DaniRose, Maria, and Jessica, if we can have the recording of this webinar and then we can post it up to that KZAA YouTube so that it can be accessible to everybody who follows that.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that? We are now at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and I want to just do a time check. How are people feeling? We've got some more folks who are weighing in here. I want to make sure that anyone else on the panel who wants to either make a comment or ask a question of anybody else in the panel gets a chance. And those of you in the audience, feel free to continue to post questions. I don't think we're going to be on here for much longer. We've had you on the line for an hour and a half, but this is a on-fire conversation, and so I want to keep the momentum going for a few more minutes. So anybody else want to jump in on the panel there, or Danny or Jessica? Is anything else you want to add that we have not spoken to at this point?
I just want to say something real quick. Since so many of the attendees stuck out through all this whole conversation, I think also an impactful way to get involved and make a difference is you sat through all of this, so you can also begin by having conversations with those closest to you in your community, especially if you go to like UCSB or live in Santa Barbara County, because you have such a strong impact with the people around you. So that's one way to make a difference, by educating and making this information as digestible as possible. Just because Danny mentioned how, you know, a lot of people don't have the time to like sit through and read these really long research reports. So maybe just like breaking down this information as much as you can go a long way.
Well said, Maria. Thank you so much. And thank you again for a perfect translation the whole way through. I know that takes a lot of energy. Really appreciate that. Other comments, questions? Okay, I got one. I think you pretty much have answered this, but I want to really just throw this out there as we think about some next stages and next steps and next chapters of this good work. Because as you mentioned, Jess or Danny, you know, you are standing on the shoulders of people who are lifting you up, and you're part of a much broader community. It's not just the two of you and Maria who have created this zine, but you all are really building on the strength and the inspiration and the knowledge of others, and extending that. And so I thank you for that. But I guess I just wanted to hear a little bit more maybe about your vision and hope for how this zine could be used by community members. And if you could talk a little bit about how this work, this particular project, builds on the activism that you've already been engaged in. And I'm forgetting who it was. There was a comment a minute ago in the Q&A where someone said, this zine is so fantastic that she could imagine seeing excerpts, pages and graphics and text on billboards around the Central Coast. So put that out there for you as well. So if you wanted to just comment a bit on that, I'd be most grateful.
I think since this is kind of a new area of studying and research that me and Danny got into, one of the biggest shocks when we went to our first public hearing for onshore oil was just the divide that there was between environmental conservationists and oil workers and the communities. And it just felt like it was either we need to solve climate change or this is our job and this is our livelihood. And there was not enough of a middle ground, a meeting zone. And that's, I think, why talking so much, like Rosa has been talking about the just transition and how we can make this possible so that these people working in this industry are set on a better and healthier and safer path. Setting that out and making those guidelines available and happen will help to make this transition easier if we're not just creating this crazy divide between people like we're seeing all around the world. So I think by creating zines that are more accessible and educating people in a lot simpler of terms, which was a big goal of the zine, I think that is where we want to head in the next steps of bringing people together in order to move towards a greener economy and a more just world in the future. Yeah.
Hear, hear. Thank you. Okay, people. Any last parting shots before we begin to wrap up here? I don't want to crowd anyone out.
I just want to give a huge props to Jessica and DaniRose for all the work that you guys did on this, and also Maria. That's so much translating to do on the spot, and and with David, just everyone involved in this project, doing really good work.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. This is going to help with all of our organizing campaigns. So thank you for the work that you all put into it.
Here, here. Thank you. Just one last comment from our audience here. You ladies kick butt. Thank you for caring about the world around us. Another person, PJ, this was great. And it's been said, but so inspiring to see youth taking charge. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So if we're all done here, I just want to then wrap up by just saying, DaniRose and Jessica, thank you. This has been truly an inspiring event. I've learned so much from you today. I will say a bit sheepishly that, I'm a college professor, of course. I'm allegedly an educator, and I think you all, without a doubt, could and probably already have reached more people with this zine than I do in an average year in terms of my teaching and writing. So I thank you for that. It's been an honor. It's been an honor working with you, and I look forward to seeing where you take this ambitious project in the next chapter of your exploration and pursuit of climate, social, and environmental justice in our region. Big thanks, muchísimas gracias, to Maria Lozano for your excellent translation. Thank you, of course, to Emily Williams for your brilliant analysis of this project and of your mentoring of Jessica, DaniRose, and the team of students who are working on these projects through UCSB. And of course, a big thanks to the Central Coast Climate Justice Network, our partners who are inspiring and supporting this work, and of course, Jeremias, Salazar, Rosanna Esparza, and Rosa Rizo-Centino. Thank you for your leadership and joining us today. And finally, many, many thanks to all of you, our audience members, for joining us, for listening, for asking questions, for making us laugh, for making us think, and for caring about this important issue. And so speaking of caring, please be sure to take care of yourself and be sure to take care of one another. And let's stay safe and healthy as we continue to build our movements for social, environmental, economic, and climate justice for the 21st century. Good night. Buenas noches. Gracias. Thank you. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.